Yeah, sure, all the gullible pundits to say, oh, she won the debate. I don't think it's going to change the trajectory of this election, because in the end, it will come down to the substance, a comparison of the record, which is there for everyone to see. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Steve Hilton Show. A special edition for you today. We are taping this right after the first, perhaps the only, debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And also a great conversation coming up with my friend Gloria Romero. We made a fantastic announcement last week in Sacramento. I'm sure you saw the news coverage of that. Gloria is here to tell us why, after all those years as a Democrat, including being the majority leader of the Democrats in the state Senate in California, she has decided to leave the Democratic Party, become a Republican. She's going to be here to tell us all about that. It's a great conversation. But first, let's get to the debate. I mean, there's so much to say about it. Let's just try and focus on the key points and how it will affect this election that is now just weeks away. I think the first thing that really struck me about this debate was actually from the very first second, literally the first second, when Kamala Harris walks on stage and she goes over, do you remember, she walked right over to Donald Trump's side of the stage and she held out her hand and introduced herself. And she said, Kamala Harris, like she's introducing herself. I mean, obviously, that whole thing was so rehearsed and so staged and completely preposterous. And it really captured for me how fake the whole thing was. We were told by Kamala Harris's campaign, by her team, that she had literally spent the last week nonstop rehearsing. I mean, it's not even in the realm of preparation. They say debate prep. This wasn't prep. This wasn't thinking about the policy issues and what her position would be and how she would answer attacks. She didn't even get challenged by the moderators. We'll get to the media aspect of this later in the show. It wasn't preparation. It was rehearsal, like an actor. And you could see that, not just the lines, the way she was delivering all these clearly pre-prepared, packaged lines on every single subject. But it's also the fact that she was out there with her facial expressions and even her gestures. Do you remember that point where she kind of, put her chin on her fist and her elbow on the thing and she was looking quizzically at Donald? You could absolutely see that whole thing was practiced over and over again. And fine, okay, as I've said, it's professional to prepare for things. But this level of rehearsal, literally just practicing your gestures, your facial expressions, every single line for a week. Remember, this is the sitting vice president of the United States, and she needs a week to get through a 90-minute debate. And that's what we saw. It wasn't actually a debate. It was a performance. And here's the serious part of that. The job of president, it's not a performance. Yes, of course, there's a public and ceremonial aspect of it. Yes, there's an aspect of it where you have to persuade and make great speeches and bring people on. That's all true. But in the end, it is about decision-making and judgment and actually implementing an agenda. Who thinks that anything we saw from Kamala Harris last night shows that she is ready or qualified to do any of that? I mean, I think back to Hillary Clinton's famous ad, the 3 a.m. phone call, when she's asking the question, who's ready for the 3 a.m. phone call? My goodness, if Kamala Harris was president and got the 3 a.m. phone call, she's not going to have a week to practice what she's going to be saying. And so the substance is what matters. And here we get, I think, to the second really significant part of last night's debate. And this is really what I think was interesting about how Donald Trump responded to a lot of the questions. I thought that what he did was actually bring people into that decision-making process in a very real way that I don't think I've seen before in any setting like that. When he was talking about Afghanistan and the deal with the Taliban and the negotiations with NATO and the way he would approach Putin in Ukraine, he actually showed us what it really means to be president and get things done. And it showed us that he's got the right instincts and he's got the judgment and now he's got the experience as being president to actually lead in the national interest. And that was the substance I thought was really so interesting, because I've said this many times before. When you run for office, of course, you make all your plans and your promises, and you've got all these things that you're going to get done. But in reality, there's always going to be constraints on that. Here in America, for example, if you're running at the federal level, you've got Congress, and you've got to negotiate, and it's not as easy as just saying, I'm going to deliver all my promises. Of course, you'll try, but you can't just do it. You can't just press a button and make it happen. In fact, when we elect our leaders, what we're really doing is judging who's going to be best to respond to unpredictable future events. How are they going to respond? Because most of the stuff, especially when you're looking at a president and the fact that it's the presidency of the United States, the leading nation in the world, with all the stuff that's going on in the world, you've got to respond. Most of the stuff you respond to never even reaches the public domain. No one even sees it or hears it, right? So you're choosing someone based on how they will respond to unpredictable future events. And what you really need to know is what drives someone. What is their core belief about how America should respond? What are their convictions? What are their instincts and their attitudes? What's their mindset? What are they bringing to the job? It's absolutely clear now what Donald Trump would bring, and he shared some of that insight with us last night. It was really interesting, I thought, hearing him talk about how he would approach some of these situations. What do we know as of last night in the debate, or the whole campaign, about how Kamala Harris would approach any of this stuff, the really serious, substantive stuff that the presidency is all about? We haven't got a clue. We haven't got a clue. We didn't get any insight into that last night because it was just nonstop platitudes, blah, 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 all her pre-prepared lines. We haven't had anything that tells us about how she would handle these things as president from the campaign, because the campaign is totally vacuous, nothing but bland platitudes. And we don't know how she would respond as an individual, because as an individual, we now see, because of these ludicrous changes of position on every single issue that matters, where she's lurched completely from one position to another, like jumping right across the political spectrum. I mean, not that long ago, she was going out of her way to show that she was to the left of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Now she's trying to make out she's to the right of Joe Biden. I mean, it's a joke. The whole thing is a joke. She hasn't explained why. She hasn't explained the change in either the situation or her analysis of problems or whatever it may be that has brought her to that position. No, because she can't. Because there's nothing like that. It's not a substantive reason. It's purely political calculation. And Bernie Sanders himself explained that. He said, she hasn't really changed. She's still a far left progressive. She's just saying all this stuff to get through the election and to try and win votes. That is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying to have someone in office as president who is so shallow, who is so hollow, who literally doesn't believe in anything other than their own political advancement. I used to say that all the time about Biden, that he's just a classic machine politician who for 50 years in public life has sort of goes with the flow. Wherever the power lies in his party, he'll go along with it. She's like that, but even worse, because it's more shameless. I mean, it's just absolutely astonishing. And the fact that she wasn't even pressed on any of that by the moderators in the debate was completely shameful. The final thing I just want to say about the debate is just the shamelessness of the lying. I mean, the lying that Kamala Harris did, the brazen lies about what Trump says and does. I mean, you're from Charlottesville to Project 2025, IVF, on absolutely outrageous lies, just totally manufactured, not held to account at all by the moderators. And then she gets away with these claims that are just so shocking when you really look at what she's done. And this is the thing that I kept thinking when she's talking about, do you remember at the end, she kept going on and on about her plan. I have a plan for this. I have a plan for that. Yeah, you also have a record. You have a record. The record of the Biden-Harris administration, as they love to call it when it suits them, totally the opposite of everything she's going on about. I mean, she's going on about how she's going to help lower the cost of living. That is a grotesque thing to say when all she's done in the administration with the Inflation Reduction Act that even Biden now admits was just with itself a lie, that it was actually a green extremism climate policy package, nothing to do with reducing inflation. Of course, it increased inflation, as did all their other massive government spending binges. So she's absolutely responsible for destroying people's livelihoods with inflation for the last few years. And then she's on there saying she's going to lower the cost of living. Same with small business. Suddenly she's a champion for small business. She said that repeatedly. What an offensive thing to say when her policies over the last few years, the lockdown, all the rest of it, just absolutely crush small business. And then she says that she's going to stand up for the vulnerable. When we look at her record in California, as a San Francisco DA, we've made this point many times before. We've had guests on that have given us the exact detail on this, standing up for the vulnerable. She helped cover up child sex abuse when she was San Francisco district attorney in order to help her political career. She sided with the perpetrators of child sex abuse against the victims. Same with sexual assault, when one of her political cronies, a serial sex offender, and she gave him a sweetheart deal because he was a political crony. It's all just a complete fiction, all this nonsense. Her record shows us that it is all fake. It is all phony. She is an absolutely classic, cynical machine politician who will say anything, do anything in order to advance her political career and gain power. That is absolutely terrifying in the position that she seeks to hold. That's actually what we saw on display in last night's debate. So yeah, sure, all the gullible pundits are saying, "Oh, she won the debate." Well, I don't think it's going to change the trajectory of this election, because in the end, it will come down to the substance, the comparison of the record, which is there for everyone to see, Donald Trump's record versus the Biden-Harris record and Kamala Harris's personal record, and who people think will actually deliver the strength and the judgment to handle unpredictable future events. And I think the choice is pretty clear. And so whatever they say about the performance last night, on the substance, there was a clear winner. It wasn't Kamala Harris. So a really special guest joining us for our policy segment of the show today. She's a friend of mine. She's on the board of my organization, Golden Together. And she recently made, with me, a very, very important announcement about her future. Senator Gloria Romero, former majority leader of the Democratic Party in the state Senate of California, announced that she was leaving the Democratic Party, joining the Republican Party, and here she is to tell us all about it. How are you doing, Gloria?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you for standing with me as I made this very important change. I'm very appreciative to you.
No, of course. And what I'd love to understand, because, we don't get the chance, often. I mean, you've done such a lot of media over this, over the past few days on this. And, usually it's kind of quick. But I was there in Sacramento when you made your statement, and it was all about policy. I mean, those are the reasons. This was based on a whole number of substantive reasons. And so I'd just like to, I'll invite you to just almost, I don't want to say read out the statement that you made. This is more of a conversation, but tell us, the reasons, the serious and substantive policy reasons why you felt that it was time to leave the Democratic Party, where you've spent so much of your professional life.
Sure. Well, I've been basically a near lifelong Democrat. I mean, in my household, FDR, JFK, RFK, these were all heroes to us. I was the co-chair of President Obama's reelection campaign. I've been to Democratic conventions as delegates for Jesse Jackson back in the day, and also then Senator Barack Obama both times. So I've been very much embedded in California Democratic Party politics, and then, of course, becoming Democratic Caucus Chair in the legislature, as well as Senate Majority Leader. So very much involved in all of this. Long story short, there are a lot of issues. I think first and foremost, it was over really essentially questions of democracy. And I began to not recognize this so-called party of democracy any longer. I was a former member of the executive board of the Southern California ACLU. Due process, fairness, free speech, not censorship were very important to me. And yet, we saw this Democratic Party being told by the party elites and the big donors that our 14 million votes in the primary already rigged so that folks like RFK and other candidates could not viably compete were just being thrown out. And that very much bothered me. Essentially, I believe a political coup was staged right in front of our very eyes. So, those are some of the due process issues. But I did see the march toward authoritarianism, censorship, on policy issues. I'm very much concerned with the march towards war of this Democratic Party, the complete embracing of sending millions and millions and millions overseas while simultaneously at home ignoring working class communities and the veterans, the very botched withdrawal from Afghanistan. Steve, honestly, that was one of the first times that I recall really thinking about what is this Biden Harris administration, because I've typically been anti-war and respectful of any soldier who has given their ultimate, sacrificed their life in any type of a war. On top of it, though, I mean, whether we talk about crime, the economy, to me, most especially schools. I've been a champion on school reform. I've fought for whether they are charter schools or full blown vouchers, whatever you want to call it. I've been very disturbed by the Democratic Party's insistence on being hitched to the most powerful political force in California, and I would say the nation, and that's the teachers' unions. And yet you turn around and you see, while the Democrats are collecting their money for their campaign coffers, kids, mostly poor, many Latino and African American families are being trapped in chronically failing schools, and the Democrats do nothing about it. Steve, it's funny. I mean, it's not funny, but when you think about it, I've been called right wing because I've supported charter schools and school choice. And I look at them and I say, no, there's nothing right wing about this. It is the morally right thing to do, to fight for quality schools and having access for the most vulnerable, because that's the American dream. So I could go on and on about other policy issues, but this might be enough to get us started.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that came up in a number of the places there was this idea of, the working class people losing out. And that to me is so interesting because it reflects this broader change, this political realignment that's actually, in a way, you're an example of, which is the Democrats losing support among the people and on the issues that with which they were traditionally associated, the party of the Workers' Party. That was what the left was. But that's a real realignment that's going on, and it now seems as if the Democratic Party represents the kind of academic elite, and thanks to Trump, actually. And this is what I've been cataloging for years now, but populism, positive populism, I called it, which is this shift of the Republican Party actually representing the working families, and that idea and the ideal of upward mobility and opportunity for working class Americans.
Right. It's interesting that Trump has been called the blue collar billionaire. And I think it's really interesting that we've seen a complete shift now. At one time, and this was part of my legacy of being in the Democratic Party, we believed that the Democratic Party was the champion of the poor, the dispossessed, the working class, getting the step, the everyday American man and woman. That's no longer the case, as you highlight. Today, it really is. And I believe under a Trump led new Big Tent Republican Party that really has turned this around. This is not either the Republican Party of, George H. Bush or a Mitt Romney trying to succeed. It really is a very different America first, highlight the American worker, protect workers' rights. Even on the issue of college, for example, in no way do I support the bailout of student loans for college educated students. I sympathize, I empathize, but when you take a look at who is paying the bills, these are largely working class men and women who didn't go to college. They went out to work. They, got into the trades, and now they are going to be stuck also paying the student loans for doctors and lawyers and
Yes.
those who went to Ivy League colleges, more of the elite. It's just wrong. And I think more and more American working class former Democrats are recognizing this and rejecting it.
Yes, and we are seeing that. I mean, and you see individual stories of it, and we featured them on this show, and you see it in the numbers, in the polling numbers, which show a complete turnaround in terms of the demographics, and typically working class people now supporting the Republican Party, and particularly and relevantly here in California, Latinos, working class Latinos, moving massively towards the Republican Party. I mean, the number that I saw just recently. Um, for example, showing Trump with, over 40% just in the poll. We're taping this on Monday, September the 9th. Just the other day, there was a poll for, this was shown as a good poll for Kamala Harris nationally because she had improved upon Biden's position with Latinos, but Trump still had over 40%, which is a massive increase from where the party was, before Trump came on the scene.
Right. And I think one of the stereotypes that the Democrats have made is over immigration. And somehow this throwing out the idea that Latinos, especially, are in favor of open borders. We are not. I fundamentally believe that Latinos are amongst the most patriotic in this country. And certainly when you take a look at those who have served in American wars and who have died in American wars, you're going to see names like Sanchez, Rodriguez, Romero. You'll see our names there. Latinos very much do believe in freedom, in opportunity. There is a value, a belief in this country. There is a lot of patriotism. Sure, we demand and we want equal rights and change where we have to have, but nowhere do we find that we believe that an open border, a lawless border, a complete mockery of even what asylum means and sneaking around to get a pathway to citizenship. We reject that. I believe in finding reasonable means to have pathways to citizenship. But what we've seen from Kamala Harris as the border czar is a complete ineffective policy, and one that really should insult every Latino who's voting in this country. This is not our issue. Don't try to placate us. The economy, crime, and of course, the border and security are very important issues for us.
So I wanted you to address something. Just see, I don't know if you can explain this, but it's interesting to me. If you like, this is particularly with this focus on working class and aspiration and upward mobility for the people who have the least. Um, why is it that you still have this self-image among Democrats, and in particular, the self-described progressives, that they are actually the ones fighting for this? For example, I just noticed, just this weekend, Bernie Sanders saying Kamala is still a progressive. She's just saying all this stuff before the election, but she's really a progressive. And it made me sort of think about the progressive thing, because if there's one place in America where the progressive agenda has been implemented without any limit or restriction, it's here in California. And we see the results. The facts are there for everyone to see. And this has been the absolute laboratory of progressivism, because for 20 years now, almost untrammeled, they've had the ability to implement it. And then the numbers are just devastating. And it's the poorest who suffer. We have the highest poverty rate in the country. We have the highest inequality, the biggest gap between working people and the rich. We have the highest housing costs. We have the highest gas prices, the highest energy bills, the highest water bills, the highest homelessness, every single thing. And of course, when you and then you look at crime and you look at education and so on, you go through the list of issues. And the people who suffer the most from all of these things are working class people. And yet the progressives still assert that they're best for those people, even though in the place where their agenda's been implemented, it's the poorest and most vulnerable who've been hit the hardest.
Well, Steve, once upon a time, I called myself a progressive, but I don't know where this went wrong. I don't recognize what progressive means any longer under the Democratic Party. And what I see today is immense regressive taxation.
Yes.
There's no progress about this in any aspect. I mean, all we have to do is take a look at the outcomes. You always take a look at what are the metrics of your policies. More, especially people of color in poverty. You take a look at the education rates and how dismal the lack of proficiency in, I believe, the most important institution in America, public education, which basically writes the ticket for the American dream. Did you know that today in Kamala Harris's hometown, Oakland, California, her hometown school district, 75% of Black and Latino children enrolled in Oakland Unified do not meet basic levels of proficiency in reading or mathematics? 75%. I mean, how do you ever become a doctor? How do you become a lawyer? How do you basically move up in the middle class? So I think with progressivism, I think one thing that I've seen, I used to call it memberitis. As people get elected, and more Latinos in California, especially, have been elected to the legislature. And that's a good thing when you take a look at the diversity of the state, et cetera. But what I found was there's this pressure to conform. The whole issue of, so-called, I mean, the Big Tent, I think, never existed in the Democratic Party. And when you dare to raise contradictory, challenging issues like education, like I did, for example, we're basically silenced. We're sidelined. We're told that we are essentially traitors to the Democratic Party. I was right wing. I mean, oh my God, like I thought, well, so be it then. I'll be right wing. I think it's the right thing to do. So I
Yeah.
think there's this pressure to conform, ironically, from the Democratic Party, which really is a very authoritarian, top down, do as we are told. Otherwise, your political careers, if you wish to have one, they're ruined. And that's, I think, what we've seen. And it works to the detriment of working people in California.
It's so interesting. I mean, you put it so well, but you look at someone like, I don't know, so I like a lot Ro Khanna, right? Congressman Ro Khanna. I think he's a great person. I think he always makes his arguments in a, in a way that doesn't demonize, unlike a lot of Democrats, he doesn't demonize Trump supporters and so on. Very reasonable in the way he makes his arguments, but he calls himself a progressive. But then you just, and he's obviously a smart person and a thoughtful person. But you just look at the results of the policy agenda, the Bernie Sanders and all of that Warren, the progressives policy agenda. It's here in California. You can see it. I mean, what's the disconnect? It's like, why, in a way, why aren't they all following your lead and joining the worker focused, positive, populist Republican Party?
Well, I think, sadly, when we analyze governance and politics in California, it's been very deleterious to have one party rule. It very much is and has been for some time top down. The donors and the elites matter. There's a reason why you've got tremendous folks like Nancy Pelosi, and I have a great deal of respect for her as an individual, but it becomes very negative when you basically have congressional members basically being told, sit down, do as you are told. And they do it, they don't challenge. It got to the point for me where I finally just said, unless we want to see change, we have to start. We have to, challenge the party. And that to me meant no longer endorsing, supporting any Democratic candidate who did not support school choice. That became my litmus test. And I think one of the first big actions that I took, well, beside my actions while I was in the legislature, going up against the teachers union, and they sure like threw millions and millions and millions of dollars against me to make sure that I would never see office again. It's important to stand up to it. That's my disappointment with Ro Khanna. I have the greatest regard and respect for him, but unless you're ready to basically say, ya basta, enough, that's it. Throw the monkey wrench in to stop the machine from just churning out the same product over and over. We are going to keep getting what we're getting.
Yeah.
And that's why, Steve, honestly, I just said at this point, I've tried, I've marched, I've spoken, I've voted, I've done this and that. It's time to walk away and vote differently. And until we do that, and I'm encouraged that so many more Californians are independent, or I believe as well, many Democrats who maybe like me for the longest time weren't ready to change our party label, but are ready to vote across the aisle and vote for a candidate irrespective of party label. I think that's important. And that's why I think California's, Golden Together is really so important. It's not a political entity, but it's bringing folks together, irrespective of party status, to talk about issues, whether it's housing and the high cost, or water, or crime, schools. It's about dabbling and talking about policies, parking the party label. And I think folks are waiting for that. I think there's a whole lot more Democrats just like me who are on the verge of walking away, either officially or at least in the ballot booth when the curtains are closed and they can cast their vote.
And that's why it's so significant that and that's why it's got so much national attention, because you're doing it as a very senior former Democrat from the state of California. And it is the state of California that represents this leftist ideology in its true form. I mean, this is where it's been developed and this is where it's been implemented. And so if you're walking away from it here in California, that's a very powerful message right across the country as they get ready to vote for someone who is, or not, who's a product of that far left experiment here in California.
Right. And I think Trump has made really strong inroads into working with the Latino community, I think to the African American communities. But even just looking at Latinos overall, we are very much being impacted by immigration, by the economy, by soaring crime. We believe in this country. We do not support open borders. And I really do think that even focusing on the turnout, key states like Arizona and Nevada are very important. And I really would strongly urge the Trump campaign to, you reach out to everybody, but I think there's a real possibility to get a very strong turnout from Latinos showing that we are ready to move into the big tent of a blue collar, billionaire led new working class Republican Party. The gains are there. And I think it's just a matter of how do you organize and get that turnout.
Final question, Gloria. You say there are other people. I mean, how does the conversation go, I suppose? What are the barriers that stand in the way of this? And when people say, yeah, I'd love to do it, but yeah, I sort of agree with you, but, how do we sort of help more people, I suppose, do
Well,
this?
what would be fascinating, I think, is bring many of us together. There are many of us already, not only here in California, but across the country as well. And I think it would be like so much fun if we even had some kind of a gathering of the minds. Like, why did you leave? What prompted you,
Interesting.
etc. I think it would be fascinating to find out whether you are an African American Democratic legislator, I think from Georgia, just recently announced that she was leaving the party. Somebody who I've long admired is that Congresswoman from South Texas who went to Congress for a brief while. She was defeated, but she's coming back. She was part of the first Obama campaign, just as I was as well back in the day. So we probably crossed paths because I was out there in Texas knocking on doors and trying to mobilize for the Obama vote at that point. So I think there's a lot of us that are there, and I think it would be really interesting. We've seen the videos. The one that's going viral on X is that African American mother, I believe she's in Chicago, talking about what this means to suddenly have all of these migrants suddenly in her neighborhood, and the recreation centers being impacted, housing, etc. You find everyday people, and legislators and former legislators, we're no different. But I think it would be so fascinating to have a conversation. And I would suggest
I
you
love
leave
that idea.
along with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., because I will say honestly, I had been thinking about this for, it had been on my mind. I had been talking about it. But when I saw RFK Kennedy move, I said, it's time. I cannot wait any longer. It is time. And I made my decision. So I'd like to give him a lot of credit. I know it was hard. His wife was under attack for supporting him. I mean, you start seeing how petty and personal it becomes. But I think it would be a lot of fun, too, to have this conversation and then to reach out. What are our networks? Somebody like Jesse Holguin, who heads up Lexit, the Latino exit from the Democratic Party. He was a Democrat. he had it as well. And he's got numerous friends and colleagues. So I think it was something that should be discussed and talked about, and let's do it soon.
I love it. And Tulsi Gabbard, of course.
Tulsi Gabbard,
Another example.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody who, a veteran, somebody who ran for the presidency and then was bad and put on the terror watch list. Oh my gosh. But there are many of us at different levels, I believe, of national and state and local government. Steve, I've even had Democrats call me since my announcement and say, "Psst, you know what? Kind of like, I'm kind of interested. I don't know if I can do it. What did you do?" It's been very interesting to see the response.
Wonderful. Well, you're a leader now twice over, Gloria. You were the majority leader in the state Senate, and now you're a leader of this movement, the walk away from the Democrats movement here in California, across the country. So we really appreciate everything you're doing and the chance to talk to you about it here today. Thank you, Gloria.
Well, thank you, Steve, for being a friend and an ally and understanding why I needed to leave and standing with me as I made that announcement. It was very personal for me. I've been blue for as long as I can remember. It's emotional to make that
Yes.
change, but I appreciate, the stand by me, the friends who were there, and I'm just always, let's keep working together to make Golden California again and do our part to make America great again.
Exactly. And last thing, Gloria, just before we go, where can people follow you? Your just share your social media and all the rest of it.
I'm on X, the new stream for freedom and free speech in the world. So I'm at Gloria J. Romero. Please join me there.
Fantastic. And we'll see you soon. Thanks, Gloria.
Thank you, Steve.
All right, here is California Corner, Jennifer Horn. Jen, it's great to see you. And I'm going to start with an apology. I always join you on Friday mornings on AM 870, The Morning Answer. I hope everyone who watches and listens to our show listens to your show. You're every day, 3 hours, unbelievably. And I failed to show up, which isn't the first time. And it's just so, and I was up as for those who haven't been following my progress on social media, I was doing a little tour of the very northern parts of California. And just, it was one of those things like suddenly you're in a place with no signal and no internet, and there you are. So I'm sorry I missed Friday
Don't
morning.
even worry. When you're not there, Steve, you are such a hard worker and you are always someplace. Like, I know that you're not there because you're just lollygagging and sleeping in. I know you're either touring to save the state of California or maybe you're enjoying some time with your kids. So either one of those things are great excuses for me. No worries.
But the thing that it's a perfect intro to our first news story that you're going to bring us today, which is it's one thing to be sort of out of reach and no signal and no internet and things like in the wild northern rural parts of California, but it turns out you can't even have reliable stuff in the heart of Los Angeles thanks to the Democrat policies. There was like a power outage or something at the Hollywood Bowl. What is going on?
So it's been very hot, and it's been the hottest it's been all year. I think they're even saying it's breaking some records. It was for the last 4 or 5 days, it's been about 107 in Los Angeles and the Valley areas. Today, it's a cool, chilly 103 as we record our podcast together. So it's been hot, which means people, want to pretend we don't live in a third world country. They want to use their air conditioning. So what happens? That puts a lot of pressure on the grid. And keep this in mind with the backdrop of Gavin Newsom wanting to make sure everybody has electric vehicles by 2035. God only knows what he wants to plug into this power grid to try to get green energy or achieve those green goals. So the first story comes out on Sunday evening that the Hollywood Bowl had to actually close down and evacuate people from the show. They had to cancel a concert because the Hollywood Bowl lost power, as well as a lot of Los Angeles. About 1.5 million customers, the LADWP said, had some sort of impact when it came to a power outage over the last several days. And I guess no one's exempt. So there was no power at the Hollywood Bowl, so they had to send everyone home. And Steve, if you've been to the Hollywood Bowl, it's no easy task to get there. You have to usually park in a remote lot, and then you have to take a bus in, or you have to do stacked parking. To get people out like that had to have been a nightmare. And so I was talking about this with a friend of mine, one of my best friends, actually, who happens to live less than a mile. I mean, literally, I could walk to her house right near me. And she goes, "Jen, you have to see what happened at my house." And she sent me a video. And at first I thought there were fireworks being sent off in her front yard. It looked like Dodger Stadium on the 4th of July. And so I looked closer and I realized that all of the sparks were coming off of the power line, Steve. That was her transformer blowing literally in her front yard. So if that's the power grid now, how are we
Yes.
going to stress this even more with all of these green initiatives? And by the way, if that is the power grid now, how can we have officials scratch their head and wonder how all these fires that plague California are getting started? It's easy to see with sparks like what happened in my neighborhood that it could easily catch fire. She was very lucky that her family was okay.
Oh, it's everything about this is so infuriating. We have these endless lectures from these Democrats about how we're the fifth biggest economy in the world. Yeah, maybe in terms of the numbers, because you've got these tech monopolies throwing off huge amounts of cash. But like actually, these are the kinds of things you expect in a third world country where you can't have reliable power. And there's just absolutely no excuse for it. And it's the direct result of their policies because they've undermined nuclear power. They've shut down natural gas, which is nuclear power is carbon free, natural gas low carbon, natural gas fired power stations are now only allowed to be a backup for when wind and solar don't produce what you need. And of course, because it's a backup, they're not maintained, so they're not ready. I mean, it's just totally nuts. And so their alternative backup to the perfectly fine natural gas power stations we had, batteries, which are completely inadequate to the task, incredibly expensive compared to natural gas, and themselves cause fires and catch fire, which we just had in San Diego, down in Escondido. A battery unit caught fire and was burning out of control for days. I mean, just the whole thing is so mad. I've said this so many times. Of all the crazy policies, the energy policy is the most incoherent, the most stupid and self-defeating, because none of it even helps with the stated goals of actually reducing carbon emissions. The whole thing is just such a nightmare. But of course, it's not funny because people have to live in these conditions. And we're going to have to get used to it because, as you said, when they want to electrify everything, including, at the moment, what is it? We have the highest proportion of electric vehicles in America. And it's about, I don't know, 7%, something like that, maybe 10. I can't remember the latest numbers, but a fraction. Imagine when it's 100%. And then the trucks as well. And the trains, they want all electric trains. I mean, the whole thing, the gas stoves are going, electric stuff. I mean, people are saying that at least we need to treble the electricity generating capacity and the supply that we have at the moment. I mean, at the moment, they're effectively reducing it because they're making it less reliable.
It's so infuriating. And when you say that this is one of the most idiotic pushes, it's because none of it makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like they have the goal, and so they're just doing the Captain Kirk thing where they say make it so, but they're not thinking about how we actually make it. And you didn't even touch on the fact that you can't, once these batteries are done, and they don't live forever, by the way, they have a very limited lifespan, then what happens? We're dumping them into the landfills? I mean, how is that a great idea? It's just so short-sighted, and there are so many ways to reach the goals and to be more responsible. And I think every single one of us wants to have a better environment, a cleaner environment, but you cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. And that's exactly what they want to do, even when they can't secure the system that we already have.
Yeah, I mean, I always say this, which is fine. Let's have a transition to clean energy. That's fantastic.
That's right.
But in a sensible, responsible way so that you keep the lights on and you can literally keep the lights on. And they're not doing that. And it's getting worse because none of it makes sense. It's totally like laughably insane. When you look at what they're talking about in terms of electrifying trucks, for example, you're going to need twice as many because they can carry half as much because they got these heavy batteries on. They're going to have to be charged overnight because that's how long it takes. And that means that all the trucks are now going to be on the road during the day instead of at night, which is going to make the traffic much worse. But, oh no, we can't build any more roads because that's bad because it's just it's sort of imbecilic. I don't. There's no words to describe how stupid this is.
Very short on common sense. So that's for sure. People see green. They always say you see red when you get angry, right? Crimes of passion. He saw red. This is all they do. They see green and nothing else. And I just, the rest of us need to figure out how to live here, and enjoy air conditioning when it's 110 outside.
Right. And by the way, just as a small story, I mean, I literally, I've now I build it into my routine. Here's a little plug for Town Hall with you and your team it's next Sunday. It's soon. It's the 15th.
Sunday the 15th.
Yes. So still tickets available, or is it all sold out?
Yes,
I
we have
don't know.
tickets available. And actually, right now, because we've heard that there's a little issue with the economy, we actually have a code that I will give to you, to your listeners as well here on the podcast. If you use the code Companion, you buy one, you get 150% off so that you can bring more people with you. And we just added an exclusive interview with Charlie Kirk. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Amazing. So that's at Universal Studios in Los Angeles next Sunday during the day. It's going to be fantastic. I think I may you
am870.info.
am870.info. Fantastic. I may well build this in because I have been over the last few days to my to my speech, because when we arrived in the northern, in Del Norte County, right at the northern end of California, to do various events, wonderful events with fantastic people. It was just so great and so fun, except for one thing, which is the bloody electric vehicle. So
I know.
we arrive, we fly to Crescent City, right, which is practically the Oregon border, and I've booked our rental car. Get to the rental car place, and there's all this paperwork, more than usual. I said, what's all this about? Oh, it's an electric vehicle. I said, I didn't book an electric vehicle. And he said, yeah, well, that's all we have. I said, I don't want an electric vehicle. Please don't. He said, that's all we have. I said, what do you mean? How can that be all you have? Well, that's all we have. How am I going to charge it? Are there charges? Well, there are no charges here. We don't have charges at the airport.
Oh,
I said,
that's great.
right. I said, well, where do you go? I said, I don't know. Is it charged? Well, it's kind of. I don't know. I think it's like it just what it is when it arrives. Is it 60%? You just on, and you just think it's crazy. We're literally sort of driving to the next meeting, and it starts ticking down. Like there's something very deceptive about electric vehicles.
Hoping you get there, right?
Yes, and so it starts off. Oh, the range 150 miles, no problem, and then it's quite slow. And then when it gets to about 100, suddenly it's like 100, 90, 80, 50, like really fast. And you're thinking, what's going to happen? Am I even going to make it? And you're trying to find the charging station, and this one doesn't work, and that one needs some stupid app that you don't have, and I don't have a smartphone. I mean, it's just such a nightmare. And you think, this is progress? No, this is ridiculous. It's making our lives worse, less convenient. All the things that we thought was progress in the 20th century, all gone in the name of what? It's just this sort of ridiculous climate extremism that doesn't make sense on any level.
It's for sure. And again, the sensibility is gone, the common sense to actually come up with real solutions that would work for all of
Yes.
us, just gone.
Exactly. All right. So talking about common sense not being there. Next story. What's been going on with? We haven't talked about this for a while. Actually, we talked about it when it first came up. Talked about it a lot then. But there was a new development in the reparations
Yeah.
story. What's going
It
on?
tells you a lot about today's Democrat Party, by the way, that they will tell you everything that you want to hear to your face, but then are they going to actually deliver on those promises? That's the real thing that has come out of this, at least for me. So you remember, just to give you a little context, back in 2020, after George Floyd, Gavin Newsom ordered this reparations task force. And a couple of years later, they came up with the very reasonable solution of giving every Black Californian $400,000. Now, how do we pay for that? We don't know. And as a reminder, California was never a slave state. So even if you are in favor of some type of reparations, in California, we did not own slaves. And conceivably, it seems odd that we would have to pay that back. Now, as the reparations task force completed their work and gave their suggestions to Gavin Newsom in the state legislature, the Black Caucus came up with a package of bills, 15 different bills dealing with all different sorts of suggestions from the reparations work that they did. And these bills were supposed to come up for a vote at the end of the legislative session. Now, keep in mind that there was a lot of funny business going on with the legislative session. They tried to push through something like 1,000 bills in less than 24 hours. They shortened the time for debate from 30 seconds to 15 seconds, really just blotting out any argument from Republicans since Democrats have the supermajority. So just in general, these great stewards of democracy not really making that felt for Republicans up in the state legislature. So because of a historic vote on reparations and California being the first state in the country to actually vote on this kind of thing, the chamber was actually filled with a huge amount of supporters for the reparations movement. As the Black Caucus is set to put these bills up on the agenda, apparently there's a last-minute call from a very desperate Gavin Newsom, who knows that he does not want to have to make the choice about whether or not to sign these bills or not once they reach his desk, because he knows they're going to pass through the legislature. So he calls and he says, you need to table these votes. I don't want them. I don't want them on my desk. and the Black Caucus tabled the votes. Steve, this is so disappointing. This is, again, I'm not a fan of reparations. I think it's ridiculous that we would actually try to have taxpayers who never owned slaves pay people who were never slaves, especially in a state that was a free state. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense on so many levels. But if you promise that you were going to do this and then you weasel out of it at the last minute, it's pretty despicable. I should tell you everything about the party that makes promises, especially in minority groups, and then weasels out, right? So Bill Asaley, who is a friend of ours, he's an assemblyman from the 63rd district, hears all of this ruckus that's going on the floor. And so he goes over to the group and he asks them what's going on. And he says, you know what? I'm not a fan of reparations, but you're here for a vote. We should get you a vote. And so he went and started arguing to put those reparations bills back on the agenda. And that was, if you saw that kind of back and forth,
That's what that was about.
Back and forth with the head of the legislature and the head of the assembly. That was what was going on. They were trying to shut him down. They were trying to shut down debate. And so Bill said, let's do it. Come on. You wanted a vote. Let's get everybody on record here. And of course they shut him down, but there was huge disappointment in the movement. And so kudos, I think, to Bill Asaley, who says, you know what? It was just the right thing to do. And yes, there was a bit of posturing and a political gamble, but somebody needs to point out what's going on here. People are being used by this party, especially in California, to try to get voters secured to vote a certain way. Promises are made, and then when it looks politically inconvenient, those promises are broken immediately.
It's a really interesting. I hadn't actually. I'd sort of seen a few headlines, but I hadn't really seen. That I hadn't understood exactly what that process was, and you've explained it so clearly. It is outrageous. He set this thing up.
Yeah,
he's the one that set it up.
And remember, he was the one that was backing off when they came back and said $400,000 for each Black Californian, and his face about dropped to the floor, because now he's got to figure out, am I going to say no to something that I initiated, or how am I going to come up with $400,000 per person? It's undoable. It's untenable.
But also, and that, I mean, the whole thing is ludicrous. I mean, then you've got, I remember looking at the time, you had, I think it was even before, you had the San Francisco Reparations Task Force, which had an additional set of things, which I think was $250,000 per person, and the forgiveness of all debt.
Yes.
And buying your house for $1, and was it $95,000 for 250 years? I can't even remember.
I mean, think that's what it was, but it was like a yearly salary.
It was so weird. It was just, in a way laughable. And I've always said that actually on this issue, if we want to have a serious policy conversation, it is absolutely true that there is a massive racial wealth gap in this country.
1,000%.
In California, that is particularly actually affecting Latinos, because the largest group, but certainly Black people in California. But that is the result, mostly, let's be honest, here in California, of Democrat policies that have made it impossible for poorer people to buy their own homes, to start businesses, to grow their wealth. That's what we, and especially the foundation of all of this kind of opportunity and closing the racial wealth gap, which is education. And you have these public schools that are a complete disaster, run by the unions. And so if you really want to, I actually called it, I tried to sort of engage in the argument years ago. I said, yeah, okay, fine, reparations, but it's about asset reparations, about building up the assets. It's about owning a home and starting a business that you can use to generate wealth. That's what you need to do. And the policies to do that are not handing money out as if it's just an enhanced form of welfare, but actually creating the conditions for people to build generational wealth. And that is the opposite of the policies you get from the Democrats.
And, I have to tell you, Steve, you've been in my mind so much since the story broke. And I referenced you a few times on the radio on my show, because I remember a conversation that you and I had about the issue of reparations. And we were both kind of finding the way, instead of handing and picking winners and losers, which is very much what this group of elected officials love to do. They love picking winners and losers. Yeah. Why not improve conditions for everybody? Because California is a majority state. So let's stop with the nonsense and stop helping 10 people when we can help every kid in California, and we can close those wealth gaps, as you're talking about, by doing a better job at the schools. Finally, I mean, instead of being at the bottom of that list, let's work on the schools. Let's make education better. Let's make it easier, reduce regulation so that people can get into homes, all people. And if we started thinking about that in Sacramento, and I know that's what's so close to your heart, and it is mine, everybody prospers. And it's not, again, just about picking a small, select few people who you're going to try to give a hand up to. It's about helping the entire state and making it just hugely better, making it the
I
reason
know.
people want to come to California.
Exactly. I mean, that's that is it should be the greatest engine of opportunity.
That's
And at the
right.
moment, it's the opposite. And actually, if you use their language right now, the greatest tool of oppression of Black people in California, Latinos in California, is the public school system run by the Democrats and their union cronies. And it is the way they approach housing. And it's the way they make it impossible to start and run a small business. These are the
That's right.
ways that people grow wealth. You start a business and you get some money and then you can borrow against it to buy your house. This is how it works, in functional opportunity economies. And the thing that's outrageous now, it makes me realize, is the thing that's really outrageous is you have Kamala Harris running around saying, I think she actually uses the term an opportunity economy, when it's her
Yes.
very policies that are destroying opportunity. And here in California is the ultimate expression of that, because we've now had, as I said earlier, we had a conversation with Gloria Romero. We've had the progressive California experiment. It's been implemented here without restraint, right? There's been no barrier to them doing exactly what they want. This is what happens when Democrats get exactly what they want.
Yep.
California is the result, and it's the absolute opposite of opportunity.
Absolutely. And if you look at Kamala Harris, by the way, one of the things, and we were talking prior to the debate airing, but one of the things I'd be so curious to ask her, she's on record telling Al Sharpton she supports reparations. So is she going to do what Gavin Newsom did and just sort of kind of
Run
duck
away
out of
from it.
that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's an important conversation for sure.
It's a great point. And I think that, the answer is probably because I think what we're learning about her, I mean, I did say this at the beginning, she's just like Biden, but worse. She's
Yeah.
just like him. She's a machine politician. You put it this way. You said she's transactional. That's
She
exactly
is.
right. She'll say whatever is politically expedient in the moment.
Yep.
But on top of that, at least Biden, you could say, comes from a sort of history and a background of being a moderate. That's true. Over the decades he's been around. I mean, of course, once he was in office, he just caved to the left. But at least he's starting from somewhere like that.
He had an ideology.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
she starts on the left, right?
that's
So
kind of the point that I've made about today's Democrat Party. The only reason they were interested in Biden is because he was already suffering. I think his ailments were already there. So they knew he was controllable. That's why they like Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, because these are two people who will do anything to get to the next job. And that's why they've thrown out Bernie Sanders. Say what you will about Bernie Sanders, but he has an ideology and he couldn't be controlled.
exactly. All right, last one. This is it's really good. It's a little bit like the previous one, which is
Slimy.
Gavin Newsom. Yeah, exactly. So this was a lot of conversation around this.
Yeah, except not much about the end result. So we all talked about the big bill, the assembly bill that was going to expand the California Dream program to make it the California Dream for all, meaning that anybody who wanted to apply for this program to get $150,000 to use for a down payment on their house, that illegal immigrants could be included in this program as well as legal residents of California. And people were not happy about this. It got a ton of media attention. Well, of course, it passes through the legislature. It goes to Gavin Newsom's desk. But Steve, very quietly, he decides he's going to veto this bill, which I am telling you, if you want to check the winds of politics, this furthers my point that I've shared with you in the past, and that is that Gavin Newsom is voting for Donald Trump because he does not want Kamala
Right.
Harris to win, because he wants to run for president in 4 years. He doesn't want to wait around for 8 years. And I think this tells you that he's hedging his bets, getting ready for a run in 4 years. He only does sensible, sane things when he knows that he has something to gain, when he has to tell a story to somebody. But he vetoes his bill after all of that hoopla, and very quietly. The mainstream media didn't really pick up much on his veto.
It's amazing. The thing about it is that I read the veto letter, and it's
Yeah.
so weaselly because it's not on the grounds of, which I think would be the normal reaction, which is, what are you talking about? This is an absolute outrage. This is
Right.
a cruel and heartless slap in the face to every hardworking Californian who's been working 1, 2, 3 jobs, saving up, trying to pull it together so they can afford a house, which is now increasingly out of reach because of Democrat policies. Only, 15% of Californians can now afford the typical house price. There's an
Right.
amazing data point I saw in an article in the Wall Street Journal recently from our friend Joel Kotkin, who's on my advisory board at Golden Together. He said in California, it takes a typical it takes the average worker, it would take 125 years to save up enough to buy the typical house. In Houston, Texas, it's 12 years, the equivalent. I mean, it's just the way opportunity has been put out of reach, and they've crushed the California dream. It's a great article, by the way. Everyone should check it out in Wall Street Journal. It's about Kamala Harris.
I will.
And how the agenda drives people out of California. But the point is, he didn't veto it because it's just so offensive to people who have been working so hard to try and afford a home, and say, well, actually, we're going to take tax money from you. We're going to give it to these people who've just showed up. No, it was a sort of procedural thing. It was like, well, actually, the fund is out of money. So at this time of fiscal, constraint, by the way, why is there fiscal restraint? Because you spent all the money that was in the surplus on election bribes. Let's not
Spoiler
forget
alert,
that.
it was you, pal.
Exactly. But that was the reason. And it's just so kind of typical, I suppose, of, trying to avoid a political problem, but not actually taking a kind of really clear moral position on something.
Right.
That whole idea was offensive and heartless and cruel. And they call it compassionate, but it's not compassionate because they, it's cruel to people who've been desperate and working so hard to try and get a home, to see this kind of thing happen. And okay, it's not going to happen this year, but it tells you where their values are, that they wanted to push this kind of
Absolutely.
thing forward.
And where their priorities are.
Yes.
And I think it's really important to know that there are people in my social circles who have great jobs who still cannot afford to buy a house in California, that even in their 40s are still having trouble becoming first-time home buyers because they have to pay huge amounts in rent. They can't save up for a down payment. It's become so prohibitive. And this is where I think of you again, Steve, about reducing regulations to create more inventory for housing instead of less. That's you living in my brain, rent-free, by the way.
There you are. Thank you very much.
No problem. But if we just made the solution for everybody instead of, because think about this, even this California Dream program, which seems like a great handout to people looking to buy a house, I think it helped maybe 1,700 people in the entire state last year because it's a lottery system and that's what it was limited to. Wouldn't it be nice to help 17,000 people or 170,000 people in the state of California spread the wealth instead of creating these programs that only help a small few?
Well, what we've learned, Jen, a very important policy detail here, which is there is one place where rents are affordable, and that is inside your brain, where I'm living rent
Right there,
free.
you live rent free. You just talk to me in my moments when
Exactly.
I'm thinking through these issues. Steve's in there with his accent telling me things.
That's my California dream being realized. Very good.
I'm sorry for the cobwebs up there. I apologize. I'll try to clean them out.
All right, fantastic. Remind everyone again, it's this Sunday. So we're taping this on Monday, September the 9th. Don't know when you're going to be listening to it, but if it's before Sunday the 15th, you still have a chance to get tickets to this great event on Sunday. So just close us out by telling us all the
Absolutely. So
information.
it's Dennis Prager, Larry Elder, Steve Hilton, Louis Gohmert, the former congressman from Texas, who is a hoot, Congressman Mike Garcia, candidate for Congress Alex Bilecki, and Warrior Mom Sonia Shaw, Jennifer Van Laar from Red State, and from the LA District Attorney's Office, Jonathan Hatami, plus Scott Baugh, who's running for Katie Porter's seat, is going to be there. We think Gloria Romero will be there as well at our VIP reception. So it is going to be a lot of fun. And this exclusive interview with Charlie Kirk, tickets are am870.info. You just click on the Town Hall 2024 banner. You will see Steve's handsome face prominently featured. And you buy your tickets am870.info. And if you use that code companion, you can buy one, get one 50% off.
Wonderful. I'm so looking forward to it. I will see you there on Sunday.
Can't wait.
All right, joining us for Candidate Corner today, someone whose race you need to pay attention to. And if you live in this district or near the district, you should get involved because this is a really great opportunity to win a district in the California State Assembly. I'm delighted to welcome the candidate, Patrick Lee Gipson. Patrick, great to see you. Tell us about the district where you are and the state of the race.
Well, the district where we are is the 40th district, and that covers all of Santa Clarita Valley, it's everywhere. Valencia, Canyon Country, Saugus. It's a huge valley. And on top of that, we have the San Fernando Valley, which is Northridge, Chatsworth, Granada Hills, Porter Ranch, and North Hills. So we do have a little bit of LA City in there. However, I think the major point of the district is Santa Cruz Valley, which has been one of my really good supporters, and we like to see that keep it that way, actually, because it's one of the top 10 cities to live in. So despite the rise in crime, it's still hanging on. So I want to make sure that gets actually even better, so we can have people proud of where they live and safe where they live. It's one of my fortes, because I am a 24-year Los Angeles County Sheriff's Deputy, so I retired about a year ago. So it is in, I guess, everyone's best interest, and mine and my family's, to have public safety back in order, because we're missing it right now.
So before we get into the specific issues, tell me about the race. So that you've got a Democrat opponent. This would be flipping a district, right?
Correct. So we'd be flipping a district back to where it was prior, before it was redistricted and gerrymandered to bring in the city of LA. And this district primarily for the 38th was never blue, purple. It was always red. And then they, obviously here comes they redraw the lines, and redrawing the lines, it brings in a heavy, a much more favorable position for a Democrat to run in and to win, like what happened in 2022. However, with those primary results that did come in, I was up about 5,000 votes the night of the election, but due to mail-in ballots, those things came in. Let's see, at the end, she edged me out at 521 votes.
That was in this March's primary, was it?
Correct.
Well, there you are. But that shows you it's an incredibly close race.
Yes.
In
very
other words,
incredible.
you are absolutely, like so many times people say, well, what are we going to do? You can't win in California. It's so difficult for Republicans to win, whatever. Here we have, you are absolutely an example of a Republican that has every chance of winning. You're absolutely set to do that. And so it's we've really got to get, I say this, so I'm trying to support you and help you in any way. We've got to get you across the line. Anyone who's interested in good governance and moving forward towards common sense governance in California needs to really focus on your race. It's a very, very important one, because it's absolutely winnable. And presumably for that reason, they're going to be throwing a lot of effort into stopping you from winning.
Yes, they've already started attacking me. So I've been seeing a lot of stuff that's been coming out on little commercials here and there. But one of the things that I wanted to make sure people understood and understand is a lot of the races, Republicans are very close in. I'm one of those top six, I think it's top 6 target races on number 2. And that winning these seats brings back ballots back to our state legislature, which we have currently no balance right now. That's why we're seeing all these bad bills come through. We're seeing, what was it, 1840 that, just got vetoed by Newsom, because that was just too much for him to handle. And if he's going to run in 2028, that wouldn't look good for him, especially with Californians wanting to make sure that they get into that program. You guys were alluding to it earlier, speaking about it. Those programs are for veterans and people who've been here, and they did it the right way. Like my wife, she came from Armenia, and her family, they came here, did it the correct way, opened businesses, great people. So my wife's an Armenian American immigrant, and she grew up in communism. So we're seeing a lot of those parallels today, and it's getting scary. And I'm telling you.
So tell me about your decision to become a candidate. So it sounds like it's a recent one. Is this the first race you're running in?
No, actually ran in the race Alex Belekian is currently in right now. That was for Congress for the 30th district. And he's currently doing a great job right now. And kudos to him, hands down. I want to see him get past that finish line. However, like I was saying, there's a lot of us right now in these areas, these races. And when we get into these races and, we're doing all these things, what gets you into them is you're looking at the future of your family. You're looking at high inflation. You've got insurance that's 3 times the amount that you were paying before, in groceries, or like you can't even believe it that we're barely able to afford that. And then on top of that, it's our gas and our fuel prices. They're astronomical, and they're not stopping. They're not coming down. There's no saying if they're going to stop, or they're going to stop taxing, or they're going to get rid of Prop 13, which would destroy a lot of families. So we have a lot to work on, but I think, what we're doing is we're running a hell of a race, and we look like we could win it. It's very close, but I need everybody on deck. It's something that, we can actually do, and it is a winnable race. With those numbers that we show, we barely spend about $10,000. They spend about $300,000 to $400,000, and that's going to be the same issue again, except for this time we're much more ready, and we have a very good plan.
So you've got some really strong candidates sort of around you there. You've got Mike Garcia,
yes,
right? He's the member of Congress he's really kind of established himself in that district. You've got Suzette Valladares, who's been a guest on our show, and I've been to support her there, as I will with you in your district. Do you sort of find that I don't know exactly how you overlap or don't, but you're certainly all there together. Does that help if you've got strong, good, positive candidates all out there at the same time? Do you work together like that, or is it you're all busy doing your own thing?
Absolutely. It's integral to work with your other partners in the area. Me and Suzette Valladares, we share a campaign office in Santa Clarita, and that is amazing to have that support from her team, and knowing that she's the one that on top of that, and Lattice City Councilman John Lee asked me to run. I was going to run against. I was going to do the congressional district again. However, this was a much more better race for me and my family, since we live in the district, and it affects California.
I mean, that's what everyone has to understand, is that, so I mean, we talk about it all the time on the show, all these, not all, I mean, of course, the federal government has a lot of influence over what happens, but these day-to-day things that affect your life, they are driven at the state and local level. That's where you've got to get engaged if you actually want to turn back the tide of this far left extremism.
Absolutely. It affects multiple families. It affects businesses with the ability to, have a business and make sure that you're able to afford it. We see that homes are, people that with their property insurance, they're not able to get it. Companies are leaving. And that's due because they're not addressing it in the legislature. They're not letting them come to the table and bringing those new policies or that information to the legislator. And it's like they're just purposely holding it down for whatever reason. It doesn't make sense to me. So I'm running on common sense, obviously, because I actually want people to afford to live in California, buy a home, raise their children without having to, be afraid, like, oh my God, we got to move to Texas. We got to move to Tennessee, somewhere other than California, the best state in the 50 states. I agree, but our government needs to have balance. And that is one of the major things that California desperately needs.
So I'm just interested what kind of reaction you get, in particular from Democrats. I mean, is there hostility from some quarters? Are you seeing Democrats saying, yeah, I'm not really a Republican, but maybe we need a change, or we need balance? What's the sort of vibe, if I can put it like that?
Well, I'm agreeing with you. Just what you said right now. We are seeing Democrats, not a lot of them, but there's enough of them coming out and say, look, something has to change. We see crime hitting our homes every day. We have the highest level of property crimes right now, and that's not slowing down. And you got people getting arrested. However, they're still coming in. So this is a nonpartisan issue where crime affects everyone. And I happen to be a retired deputy sheriff for 24 years. I think I know and have the skills to take care of our people here, because we're victims every day. And when I hear it, I see it in my own neighborhood, I just like, wow, I can't believe that the soft on crime policies that are coming out of Sacramento with my opponent defund the police activist. She actually said for law enforcement to quit their effing jobs.
No,
And, that's one of the
that
things
should be
that
that's really unbelievable. And that should be disqualifying.
you would think so, but she's getting support from another police union, one that I know of. I've got all the endorsements from every other police union except for one, and they may be leaning a little bit left and thinking that I'm too extreme. I'm definitely not too extreme. I'm middle of the road. I'm moderate. I want to make sure that I take care of everybody. It's not one section of the district I want to take care of. It's everybody. So when you do become an elected official, you're responsible for that whole district, not just the people who voted you in. You have to make sure that you're able to do that job. And it doesn't matter what your beliefs are. If you're, Christian, Muslim, whatever, you have to make sure you're there to represent the people fairly. And that's what I bring.
So can I ask you about crime and the connection, if there is one, or what do you see the impact being of the ballot initiative on reforming Prop 47? So this year it's Prop 36. What do you think that will do? Is that going to help you in any way, or is it not really relevant?
I think it's a start, especially when there's going to be more consequences. I don't see them going full reverse on it, but at least they're going to be able to fix a few of the things, and I think that's necessary. That's not the full answer to solving all the crimes that are going to be happening. We still need to address Prop 57, which makes it. They show that non-felonies or non-violent crimes, they're going to let them out early, or they're going to let them out on not even bail. Just we'll let them out until their court date shows up. And on top of that, with LA County, we have zero bail policy. If you can't afford to do the jail time with bail, there's no jail for you until court time, and that could be 8 months to a year from now. So if they're constantly getting cite outs, okay, show up to court this date, show up to court this date. You can have about 5 or 6 citations to show up, a promise to appears, to show up to court. However, you, during that time as a criminal, can still commit crimes, and commit crimes. And so when they have the Prop 36 come out, so I'm going back to the 36, it's a good start, but it's not going to really affect everything. We need to vote for it, yes, but we need to do more.
Maybe the way you've characterized it sort of answers the next question, but do you get the sense that people are excited to go out and vote for Prop 36 in a way that might help you because you're going to get a higher turnout, or is it not really registering that way?
Absolutely. And I've been supporting Prop 36 from before it even got on the ballot. So that's one of the things I know. We have to make that effort, and people will allow, like I said, it's a nonpartisan issue. People want to come and vote for their safety. I even have my opponent saying now she's good for Prop 36 when, she wouldn't say a peep about it. But when you do polling and you find out that crime and the economy is number one, they change their tune real quick so they can get elected. So it's something that they don't have any consistency on.
Well, it's interesting, though, that at the state level, they're still really against it. So Gavin Newsom's really hard against Prop 36, even though you have Democrat mayors like London Breed in San Francisco, Matt Mahan in San Jose. Sounds like your candidate in your race, you've got Democrats who are saying we need this, but he's still holding out. It's very weird. I just don't really understand it.
It's just to get their votes, so they can say, hey, we're for this too. And like I said before, my opponent, she's been a defund the police activist since 2019 or before. She's put out several tweets, and now all of a sudden, crime is it's a big issue for her. And I'm gonna, call it what it is. And there's 2 letters. I'm not using them. What it is it's the ability to at least look at somebody in the face and say, yes, I'm for, protection now. And for me, it's not truthful. It's not who the person is. If you're going to run on something like I've been running on, public safety since the beginning, because, I'm really familiar with that and more intimate. I think you are dissuading and you're manipulating voters who really, if you come, they just want your vote. They're going to switch back over and go, look, Newsom told me to vote this way, and now I'm going to stick with what he said. And that doesn't help us.
I mean, it doesn't make any sense, because you've got you've got a track record for the opposite policy. So you said, well, okay, if you say you're now for public safety and so on, then which of these policies that have been in operation for the last 5, 10, 15 years in California, which of them are you now against?
Right.
You've got to repudiate the things that you used to support and explain why you've changed your mind. But if you don't go through that process, it's totally incredible. Just like Kamala Harris at the national level. If you can't just sort of turn around and say, "Oh yeah, I'm not for that anymore." You've got to explain, well, wait, what happened? Why? What changed your mind? Why do you now think this? That's the only way in which people will believe you.
Right. And when I've seen that happen, actually, we had a town hall not too long ago, about a week ago or less. And it was my opponents telling, well, people shouldn't be price gouging and raising their prices. They have no choice. They're getting taxed beyond belief. And you're calling it, price gouging. It's not. It's to survive and have a business and support your family and have employees. But when they strip everything away from that business owner, it is difficult to make that decision. Can we continue to do business here in California? And it's getting to where a lot of people are making that decision and they're up and leaving. So it's not something that we can sustain here and run a state. It doesn't work.
Well, I agree. And I think more and more people are waking up to it. That's why I said last week when I introduced Gloria Romero at an event in Sacramento, as she was the former majority leader joining the Republican Party, I said, and I've said it subsequently, I think there is a revolution brewing in California. People are waking up. They're realizing that we're just not going to get what we want, which is change, if we keep voting for the same thing. If you want change, you've got to vote differently. That's basically it. That certainly applies where you are. So let's just leave it there, Patrick, for the moment, and just tell everyone where they can get involved, support you, follow your campaign.
Well, you can go to my website. It's gipsonforassembly.com. It's GIP as in Paul, SON, the number 4 assembly.com. You can find me on Instagram, Patrick Lee Gipson for Assembly, Patrick Lee Gipson for Assembly, Facebook. I have a phenomenal campaign manager. She's my wife, Nune Gipson. She's also the best fundraiser I've ever had. So, there's a lot of ways to get a hold of me. We would love to have you walk our neighborhoods, walk your neighborhood, canvass, make phone calls, because that's what it takes to make sure that you can stay here in California. And I'm all for that.
It's a great way of putting it. It's in all our interest that you win your race. Patrick Lee Gipson with a P, remember. Great to see you today. I'll see you there soon, I hope.
Yes.
And good luck with everything.
Well, I appreciate you, Steve. Thank you so much.
Okay, let's finish with the debate again. And here's something I want to get off my chest. It's not just the absolutely egregious, grotesque bias of the moderators in last night's debate. Of course, everyone's talking about that. That's true. It's very clear. All the sort of examples of it, the fact that they endlessly fact-checked Donald Trump. They never fact-checked Kamala Harris. They let her get away with lie after lie after lie. They even sort of helped her out, trying to kind of coach her in some of the answers. I mean, yes, that's all true. It was a disgrace. Everyone said that ABC would be a disaster and a disgrace. And I think that it was even worse than anyone expected. There's a particular aspect of it, though, I really, really feel strongly about. And I'm sorry to be personal, but there's something so gross about one of the moderators in particular, David Muir. The way that he had this completely fake, gravitas and the pomposity. He was so sort of puffed up and sanctimonious and self-regarding and smug in the way he was handling the debate, all the while a total partisan hack. There was something about it that was just so gross. When I was watching him, you just think, how can this person be taken seriously ever again? David Muir disgraced himself even more than ABC in general in the debate last night. I just cannot see how he can ever be taken seriously again. All right, that is our show for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. Tell everyone about The Steve Hilton Show, and we will see you back here for another episode next week.